All right, we're back. Another week.
Another week. Not a 2-episode week last week. I told the audience that I would blame you, that they should blame you if we did not do 2 episodes last week, and it turns out not your fault.
It was an ambitious goal. We like to set stretch goals here for ourselves. We don't always meet them, but we set them, and that's what's important.
Setting them, you do feel somewhat I give myself a lot of credit for losing weight the moment I'm like, I should lose some weight. That's about 80% of my weight loss credit that I give myself. Well, so you and I golfed together, and I didn't even tell you this, because we're in this phase of friendship and podcast hosting where I feel like some stuff I shouldn't tell you before but this happened, we were in the middle of it, and in fact I actually told the other guys we were golfing with before you showed up what happened, and I just forgot to tell you. It wasn't I wasn't holding out on you in any way.
Well, that's okay. I mean, you guys got there super early. I actually got text that you were all there before I'd even left my house.
Yeah, which was I would say early for golf. We were like 20. I think the latest of us showed up 20 minutes early or something like that, and you showed up about 5 minutes early.
Yeah. No, that's usually my MO. I like to.
Sure.
There are days where I'll go out and I'll hit a few before I play, but
sure.
I'm good with just walking right to the first tee and going.
Yeah, well, and you had the best score of all of us. We could spoil that part, but the thing that happened that caused a lot of problems in my life that didn't allow us to record a second podcast is on, I guess it was either Wednesday or Thursday, my wife dropped my daughter off at daycare, and I won't give any details about where my daughter goes to daycare, but it's at a place that you would expect to be a safe place. And in the period of time that she walked her into the classroom and came back out, her car window was broken, her purse was stolen out of her car, and then the people went and spent, that's like a hassle. The funniest part, I mean, they got like a bunch of gift cards. My wife had accidentally or unfortunately had about $700 worth of gift cards in her, which is not, that's not great. That is
like, if you are a car prowler, that's like the dream come true right there. Because it's the only untraceable thing, really.
Right. So they used her credit card, but they only used it to buy gas at 7-Eleven, which apparently I went in and interrogated that very 7-Eleven, and apparently the cameras are just useless. They're just too blurry to read license plates at the...
Maybe give out their address. And then anyone who wants to hit that 7-Eleven can do so.
Yeah, if you have a stolen credit card, the one of the 6th Avenue in Tacoma 7-Elevens, please don't use that information to hurt my family in any way. That would be the nearest 7-Eleven to. I also, by the way, I haven't seen myself. Do I have it's like a way where it's on this side. That's the problem. I have like a weird mustache situation going on there where it's like, I really should just see you. I don't want to see me at all. Anyway, so yeah, they spent like $31 on my wife's credit card on gas. And then that turned into, I mean, what sucks is they get $31. They get Costco gift cards, which I guess you could probably buy. But, I don't know if gift cards are that untraceable. I haven't dug into it very far. But I do suspect that if we really badly wanted to find this and we had access to everything, we could figure out who bought us that, figure out who bought that gift card and then who uses that gift card to ship to whatever. I bet this information is connectable, but these law enforcement agencies are not really that concerned over like a couple people losing about $1,000 when it comes down to it, because the window costs about $300. Shout out to Magnatech Glass in Federal Way, by the way. They're friends of comedy, I will say, and they've done. One of their former employees did very, very quick turnaround window glass on my wife's car in the past. They did some residential glass for us when our neighbors, I have a suspicion they hit a golf ball into our window, but we never found the golf ball. This was years ago, and then now we've got this this second time in about 7 years that my wife's car window is broken to steal something out of it. This case, a lot more excusable. The last time, I had a joke about this for a while. The last time they got a backpack, and they had to be thrilled. You open it, you break into a car, you get a backpack, you're like, there's got to be a computer in here, something valuable. And what they got were 130 middle schooler essays on the importance of Harriet Tubman, which has to be one of the least valuable things I've ever heard of in my entire life.
Some would say that's priceless. Hopefully they were able to read and learn something.
You would hope so. So anyway, that was ended up being, a couple days worth of hassle, because it goes from like we're having a decent morning to like now the whole day is about getting this window back in, getting these cards canceled, getting them all redone. So yeah, I mean, luckily we're in a position where it doesn't crush us financially. But again, I did tweet about it, that because I know some people, and I know some people who've gone through a lot of shit, and I know some people who, like, the moment something bad happens to them in any way, like, oh, I lost $20 on the ground, I'm starting a GoFundMe to recoup that $20. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
we've had some expensive problems in the last couple months, and have not use the GoFundMe route. I am did you just experience some internet connectivity issues, it would appear?
Internet connectivity issues, to quote Parks and Rec. Yes, you're cutting in and out a little bit, but I can hear. But your audio is good. Your audio is good. It's just, you might actually, and this is something that this is a Zoom meeting pro tip. But if you turn off your camera, unless you really want the people to see you, that might actually help you.
Well, here's the problem I have. My internet is so fast. It's crazy. It's 207 download, 113 upload right now. It's like very fast internet, but for some reason it's like been unreliable. This is the exciting shit that people come to this podcast for. I think we go with the video for now, and if it continues to be a problem, that's actually why I'm inside and not in the garage right now, because I did put the air conditioner in the garage. The garage is finally equipped to be something of a podcast studio from a heat management standpoint. That's the only standpoint. Otherwise, it's a wreck still. But
I don't envy you guys this week. If it's going to be 90 degrees plus every day this week, or at least most of the days this week. Yeah. An older house like that can be tough.
Yeah, I mean, like we are like the house that's got now 5 different air conditioners sticking out of windows. So we're keeping cool just fine. My mom lives on the 6th floor of a building and refuses to get an air conditioner, and it's I don't understand it at all.
That's that's brutal. I mean, the vast majority of my life, my entire life up till this point, I've lived in the Pacific Northwest without air conditioning. This is the first summer that I have it. I can't go back. It's just one of those things that you just can't go back. I mean, there's so many things as you become an adult where you're like, I can never go back. If you get like a king size bed at any point in your life, going back to a queen or smaller would be just impossible, right? And that's the same thing with AC. Once you have it, it's like they've got you for life, because going back to that world now would be very difficult. I actually, even before we podcast, just because I sequester myself in a room where I close a door, I will actually go and turn down our central AC. I'm like, if I'm going to be stuck in that room for an hour plus, I need it to be even cooler than it already is. That's how needy I am.
The king size bed thing is funny. I've sworn off Airbnb for like family trips now, because it's so hard to find a king size bed in an Airbnb, and that's the first thing I look at. I will stay in a dog shit hotel for a king size bed over a nice hotel with a queen size bed.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, there's been memes and stuff and jokes about just people staying in hotels over Airbnbs. I mean, I feel like the Airbnb or Vrbo or whichever one of those services you prefer, that arc has kind of like peaked, and I think now we're on the downslope of that. Sure. Because it does seem like more and more people, and maybe it's just our age, I think as you get older into your 30s, 40s and beyond, you're like, I'm going to the place that has the comfort and the amenities that my old ass body needs. Like, sure. That's the thing about staying at somebody's rental house. It's a hodgepodge. Even if it looks good in pictures, that doesn't mean the bed's comfortable. That doesn't mean it doesn't smell bad in there. A lot of things can come your way, but no, I totally get it, man. It's one of those things where it's like, hey, if it costs slightly more for a hotel, you're gonna make up that cost and comfort.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the exception to that is like if you're going to a place with 5 dudes and nobody plans on sharing a bed, you could probably save some money by doing an Airbnb. And then it's also like kind of a fun experience to be like comedy trips. sharing a hotel is the very bottom of comedy, but sharing an Airbnb is actually like the step up, because that means that you're big enough that you could like get a hotel buyout or something like that. Or, I mean, sometimes what it means is like I shared an Airbnb with my friend Gabe Rutledge because we were doing like Coeur d'Alene, Spokane, all over this area, and we picked like a centrally located Airbnb. But yeah, the mattresses are always bad. They're like, they always hurt my back. It always sounds like a better idea. And like I think it was, we were doing this podcast when it happened. I was in a, what do you call it? A cabin with my friend Adam Tiller. And that was like, one night was enough. And then I just got a hotel the rest of the time. Cause it's too much even. I would even say enough is a little bit of an understatement. I was done with the communal Airbnb, the too soft of a mattress, the too small of a mattress. I can do a queen if it's just me, but if it's me and my wife, there better be a goddamn king mattress.
Yeah, if it's just you and a significant other or spouse traveling, just get the hotel. But you're right. If it's a group of people, if you're traveling with a bunch, I totally understand renting at the house. You know, when we were younger in our early 20s, and I was doing all those trips with guys and stuff and going to bowl games and things like that, you know, the buddy trips, Airbnb really had not yet taken off. So it was still, we were cramming 5 or 6 guys into like a double bed hotel room and just dealing with it. And which, going back in my mind now, the most vivid thing about that situation is the odor. You know, it's got the frat house / locker room vibe where you just can't escape the smell, and in the back of your mind, every guy in that room thinks, hey, I'm single, if I meet a woman, I've got a hotel room I can take her back to. No, you don't, man. You do not have that, because
you have negative hotel rooms at that point. That's
you have worse than a hotel room. There is no person on earth who's going to come to that room with you when there's 4 other dudes sitting in that room too.
You have a sleeper cell to bring her back to, basically.
It's a slight step up from a jail cell, I would say. Yeah. And it's different now. I mean, you have a lot of options now depending on how you want to stay. I've done it all. I've been in Airbnbs, I've been in Verbos, I've been in hotel rooms. I still prefer the hotel room. I still like having someone come in and make my bed every day. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, that's so funny. So you're a person who allows room service to occur still, even in 2023. Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Even before the pandemic, I'm a person that shows up. Let's say I'm staying for 3 days. Maybe I'll pull that do not disturb sign off one day, but I'm definitely not having them redo my sheets every day. I don't want them in my room ever. I don't want to be woken up by anyone. That's the biggest thing, is like being woken up by housekeeping, either coming in or knocking. You're like, I'm completely I would much rather have uninterrupted sleep than a clean set of sheets. I sleep, by the way, it's also like, maybe you're a little different than me, but when I was a single guy living on my own, the frequency that I changed my sheets, I had no business making a housekeeper do it every day, okay?
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I'm very trusting of these people, I guess. I don't know. I have nothing
I don't think they're going to steal. I just don't want, like, I certainly don't think that. Don't you dare accuse me of that. No, it's not really that.
Well, you've just been through it. It could be a triggering experience.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. It is funny how you start to my wife had this concept that like she's like, well, these people are going to steal my identity and they're going to come to our house. They know our address. They're going to come to our house. And it's like, well, our address was like, our house still existed before they stole this stuff. If they wanted to break into a house that looked like a middle-class person's house in Tacoma, Washington, there was plenty of options. But also, like, I don't think the people that are going, like, using a credit card to buy 7-Eleven gas are also stealing identities and, bringing us down from the ground up. Like, I think it's very obviously some people who needed, like, probably money for drugs or something like that. And
now you're assuming.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
or maybe they just need money. I don't know.
Maybe they needed money. I assume that they are suffering in some way. So I'm
right. No, I totally get it, man. I will say that when it comes to something that can easily ruin your day, most people are like, I'm not gonna let whatever ruin my day. I get that, but when your car gets broken into, it really does ruin your day because unless the last time I think my car got broken into, it was because I was a dumbass and just left the back hatch of my SUV open overnight.
Oh, yeah.
And I walked out there and I saw it wide open and I was like, idiot. And all the stuff had been taken, you know. But in a normal situation, someone's busted a window or busted a lock and like made, in addition to losing the things you've lost, which, you know, feel about those things however you want. Now you have to go and get your car fixed in some fashion, which sucks because that is just like, you're not going to be driving around with a busted out window for any longer than you possibly can. And that's just like one of those things that can really be terrible. And yet we all go through it. Like, I feel like that's not only does it like personally affect you and you just want to like rant and rave about it, but also people just generally don't have a ton of empathy or sympathy for it because it's like, we've had it done to us. We've all been there, but at the same time, it's like not the worst thing that could happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I also earlier in the week, I had I went and did something and I got out of my car and I was like, my daughter had been playing with my wallet earlier in the day, and I got out and I realized my wallet's not in my pocket, but this, you know, it's probably in the house because I remember her playing with it. And then a couple hours later, a man shows up at my doorstep and he's got my wallet which is nice, by the way, that that
is nice. Yeah.
But they didn't throw it in my yard. They still were trying to like get rid of it, basically. But he was like, it lives in my neighborhood, and he's like, yeah, this got thrown at my apartment door. So, and there was no cash in it. I had like $200 in cash. The cash was all gone. So this, and then there was, I can't remember the other story. I had 3 things that were like a very Tacoma, like So that happened on like a Tuesday, and then on the following Friday, my wife's car gets broken into. I think maybe Thursday, my wife's car gets broken into. And then on our porch, we have a security camera, and we just had a birthday party, and there's still a cooler with like a bunch of juice in it. And we wake up, and at like 6:30 in the morning, we have a video of somebody like going through these juices and picking their favorite. And it's just like, I mean, the juice, I don't care. Take the juice. I'm sure, by the way, this woman looked like she needed some juice. Let's say that. She needed some juice and a warm bed and a hot shower. And so I'm less mad about that, but it was like just 3 things to really shake your trust in humanity. I do think the move should be, though, like, especially with wallets, take the cash, leave everything else, please. Like, you're not going to get anything. My credit card's going to be canceled before you can buy anything significant on it, probably.
Yeah, also
fucking leave my ID, please.
I agree with that. 100%. This is the reason I never ever carry cash unless I'm going to the casino. That's about it.
Sure.
But otherwise I will always make it a point to go to an ATM, deposit any cash I have, because I'm like, if I'm losing this wallet, at the very least I'm not losing any cash with it.
Yeah.
But you're right. The people that are stealing wallets, breaking into cars, they're not sophisticated ID thieves that are going to take your credit cards and your license and like make a lot out of them, right? So it's like, just leave that stuff behind. The one thing that the last time my car got broken into, it was a treasure trove at that point in time. I was actually about to I'm a sneaker addict, and I was actually selling some of my sneakers that I had to a buddy who wore the same size. So I'd put them in the car, and that next day I was going to go drive up and meet him to pass off the sneakers. There was like 3 or 4 boxes of sneakers in there, and those of course got taken.
Sure. And
that was whatever, man. I was going to get rid of those anyway. I was going to make $200 off them. I didn't really care that much. The thing that really like pissed me off is that, and look, this happened in the middle of the night. So it's like this person presumably had time to rummage through the things that they wanted and probably could have been a little bit more discerning about what they were taking. But I can't imagine any thief ever thinks that way. I'm sure even if it's 4 a.m, they think at any moment the police or somebody are going to jump out and confront me while I'm doing this. So I'm sure they just grabbed as much as they could as quickly as they could. But they took my high school duffel bag, which everyone's seen the high school duffel bag. It's got your high school colors on it, and I'd had that since I was like a freshman in high school, and it was just like my gym bag, right? It had nothing of value in it. It probably had like some dirty t-shirts and a towel in it or something from going to the gym, but it had nothing of value in it, and someone just took it. And I was like, in all likelihood, it's got my name on it. All they're going to do is take this thing, take the garbage out, realize there's nothing here, and trash all of it. And it's like, I understand people are going to break into cars because they need money and they need shit. Just leave people's personal shit there. Like, if you see like a photo album, leave the fucking photo album, man. Like, that matters more to a person than anything that you're gonna get out of it monetarily. Like, at that point,
course.
I understand. Anyone who breaks into a car is probably a dick, but I understand the element of survival.
A dick did, by the way. Like, that's
right.
I do think it comes from a bad place.
I understand the element of survival and feeling like, hey, I need this more than this person who has this car who can afford to pay their bills. But the personal items, just leave them, man. There's no reason you need that. There's just no reason you need that stuff. And that matters more to almost anybody than like all those kids in their Harriet Tubman essays they'll never see again. My God.
Well, yeah, that's to me the thing about it's not really I mean, it sucks. $1,000. I'd love to have $1,000 back, of course. It's yes, there's like some personal stuff that can suck. Like I remember when I got my truck broken into one time and they stole I had like some audio equipment. Again, I was actually going to sell it behind the seat. So that's, whatever. That sucks. It was like $100 or something like that. But I remember my grandpa had just died and they had given me they gave me like half of the sympathy cards at the funeral, just like a random selection of half of them, right? I don't think any of them had like money or anything in them, but the person went through every single sympathy card, wrinkled them, tore them apart, just getting them open as quick as they could, and just left them on the seat. And that felt like much more of a violation. Again, like if there was money in them, yes, there's like a monetary violation, but more so it was like, you're like, this is my fucking grandpa's funeral, and you're like, this matters as a person. I matter less to you than whatever fucking $40. I guess you're not getting like a Best Buy gift card as a sympathy thing. You know what I mean? Like,
here's the thing. This is what I would say to people. Look, if you want to break into my car, just leave a note on the car and say, hey, meet me back here tomorrow, and I'll give you $100 not to break into my car. How about that?
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I was ultimately getting to is like what they robbed me of more than money is time. We lost like 2 days worth of stress and trying to make all this shit work. My wife still doesn't have her cards back. Like, we have a new kid. This could have been a real fucking problem. I will say one thing, and I don't know that these people were thinking about this at all, but they broke the driver's side window, but neither of the spots that have car seats in them, which I do appreciate, because getting broken glass out of a car seat doesn't seem like a ton of fun.
That would suck.
Or that I'd ever really feel super comfortable that there wasn't like a mystery shard waiting to stab one of my children. You know what I mean? So that's I mean, I guess better. It still sucks. And the unfortunately, like, then we found out later that the car that they were using is likely stolen. And so we don't have there's just like very little hope that any resolution will happen from this, obviously. And that kind of happens at the beginning. That's why it's so frustrating, is like, if it was 3 days and then everything gets returned and it's a little bit of stress, and then like even insurance, you're like, do I fucking spend a $500 deductible to get all this stuff back, get recompensated for all this stuff and get this window fixed, and then my rates are going to go up whatever amount, and it's like the basically, even in this situation, the insurance wasn't worth shit. You know what I mean? Like because we're not going to use it, because it's like you get like, let's say we get $500 marginal gain, but then our rates go up $50 a month or something like that. Then we lose it in a year. We lose that amount in a year. Yeah,
it's I mean, I've had my car broken into many times. I've had it back in the day when I was younger, stolen.
Sure.
Nothing. No one ever finds. Like, no one's gonna do anything.
My wife.
It's like the line from Superbad. If the criminal had ejaculated all over the car, then maybe we'd find him, but he didn't.
My wife, when we were very early in dating, like in the first, I think it was 7 months in, because it was right around Christmas. Her grandpa had just passed away, and her grandma was driving her grandpa's truck, kind of like out of nostalgia, and she also used his truck to deliver. There was like a cedar chest and some stuff like, whatever, like mementos of his to deliver. And this is like the first time I've ever met my wife's grandma. And I leave early, and then I find out that the truck was stolen out of their driveway. So these people don't know me from, they barely know me. And then the first day I ever see this lady, the truck goes missing. I have to be like, if I'm not the top suspect, I'm on the suspect list, no doubt, right? And then the truck just never reemerges. And then a year and a half later, they find it. It's just parked at an apartment complex like a mile and a half away. Someone just, again, it's like the convenience of, well, I need a ride, so I'm going to fuck up this person's year and a half so that I can have a ride to this apartment complex. You know what I mean? And I think that genuinely was like, those were all the miles that got put on it even, were just, that's right. So now I want to put like air tags on everything I own and fucking, I'm ready for the next person,
Yeah. I mean, it is bold to be stealing stuff anymore with the way there are security cameras everywhere and air tags and just various things that could, it's like,
by the way, we have these people on camera.
Right.
We have them. I gave a description to the police. Yeah. I sent the video to the police. The license plate just isn't clear enough. Like, what are we at with camera technology that I got 3 angles of this asshole, but I can't get a fucking license plate?
This is why you need the air tags. It's like when Sean Kemp had all his stuff stolen.
I know. I could be in prison for trying to shoot these people right now.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, what are you even going to do if you catch people in the act? It's like, I'm not going to like kill you because that's not worth it probably. So it's like, I guess I'd want to talk to you.
Yeah,
I'd want to understand why, but you probably don't want that. So,
also, I guess an air tag, probably people know what an air tag is now, and they just throw that shit on the ground and move on.
Well, and also, like, if you happen to have an iPhone and there's an air tag moving with you, we're having an
internet problem. I can feel an internet problem occurring.
It's good. I'm good.
Oh, it's good for you. Okay, I'm telling you, I got the fastest internet available. I'm literally sitting next to this router, and it's fucking these
internet's the internet industry is a scam, man. I get told all the time that I've exceeded my limits on my unlimited internet. So explain that one to me, Xfinity.
Speaking of scams, I think we have a segment. Yeah. I think we have a segment.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about it.
So the subject of the movie and Michael Lewis book, The Blind Side, Michael Oher and his family, the Tuohys, and I think that's how it's pronounced, but they don't.
The Tuohys, yes.
It never looks like Tuohy to me, but it's so to I think most people probably know the story, but to give it like a brief, it's like a classic white savior tale, as we didn't have that terminology when it came out, I don't think, but where a white family adopts Michael Oher, who's an underprivileged black guy, they take him to a private Christian school. He presumably on scholarship, or they pay for him to go. Becomes an athletic star. Now he's an NFL. Now he's a retired NFL player. He was an NFL player for a while. He becomes the subject of this book by Michael Lewis. By the way, Michael Lewis is like my favorite author, I think, in the world, who's written a bunch of books. I heard him say he keeps trying to write books that are too boring to turn into movies, and they keep being made into movies. Moneyball was a Michael Lewis book. The Big Short was a Michael Lewis book. And then Michael Oher has a new book out that I'm actually going to buy the audiobook for, because some of this stuff gets detailed in there. But so what we found out, or what I think I found out, and what maybe a lot of people are finding out today, the Tuohys never actually legally adopted Michael Oher. Instead, they have this conservatorship thing where they can do business on his behalf, kind of like Britney Spears' dad. According to Michael Oher, these people they were making money off of this movie and off of this book, and he has made money off of either neither, or not off the movie at least. And he, I think he feels exploited by these people, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think have I depicted the story accurately? Is there any other detail that I'm missing?
That's certainly what it sounds like. Based on all the articles I read, it seems like the Tuohy family set themselves up to profit off Michael Oher's story, and the story that in some ways they helped contribute to, many ways I would say. And in turn, they gave him nothing. So he was making no money off his own story that had been turned into a book and then a movie. And presumably once they get to a feature film, they're making a considerable amount of money off that story. And I'm sure we don't know the whole story yet, but I'm sure part of it in their mind, they probably justified it by saying, hey, we gave this kid a home. We helped get him to college and then ultimately the NFL, where he presumably made a good amount of money there. Yeah. We don't. I'm sure to them, maybe it seems like they don't know him anything, but it certainly feels. It feels wrong.
Yeah.
If most people, whether you've seen the movie or read the book, you probably know about the story. I mean, it was a pretty big movie. Sandra Bullock and Tim McGraw starred in it. It's probably close to. It's over a decade old now, I would assume. Probably close to about 15 years old at this point. So it was, it was a popular story. I remember watching the movie and thinking it was pretty awesome. It was one of those good sports stories that is probably a little too embellished to be 100% true, but it's taken a while and we just didn't know how untrue maybe a lot of it was. And I think one of the interesting indicators is that I remember when that movie came out, Michael Oher himself was like resistant towards it. He wasn't a big fan of his story being put out there, and it wasn't really clear why. It wasn't super clear why he was hesitant to embrace his newfound fame, really, because most people just don't know like an average offensive lineman in the NFL, but in Michael Oher's case, everyone seemed to know his name overnight because of this story, and he just never embraced it. And I think now we're kind of finding out why. It probably at the time, he was a very young man in his 20s, probably still trying to figure out like who he was and what he was. And now later on, he finds out, hey, I haven't made a penny off these things that, my so-called family has made, presumably, if not millions, hundreds of thousands off of at least. A lot of money, a life-changing amount of money. And to not be entitled to any of that is wrong. And also at the same time, he was led to believe that he had been adopted by these people, which comes with it many financial implications. When they pass on, if they really consider him one of their children, and I know they have, at least in the movie, they had 2 biological children.
I think it's real.
But they were a wealthy family to begin with, right? So if you adopt a child, they should be entitled to some of your familial wealth, in the years that go by, upon your passing, that sort of thing. And it turns out he was never adopted when he was kind of led to believe that he was. And that presumably might mean that he's not included in their will. He's not a benefactor in any way when they pass on. Mm-hmm. And that's messed up, man. I mean, to take advantage of this kid. And, I mean, you can kind of joke. We can all joke about it being like the white savior move. But just, I'm sure for him personally, it feels shitty. Because you've kind of like...
the thing, I would say, like... my God, the internet is rearing its ugly head. It doesn't want me to talk about Michael Oher. It doesn't want me to give a nuanced opinion on the Michael Oher. So I would say that the one thing that he didn't like that I can empathize with or sympathize with at least is he didn't like being depicted as stupid in the movie, because that's one of the things they depicted him as, like a guy who had no real academic prowess or ability, and then the Tuohys came in and suddenly he was an acceptable student, whatever. And I think that he contends with that specific point.
Sure.
I will
Anyone
say
would, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really one thing about this is that I think that he could have benefited from them and everything was positive. And at the beginning of his, when he's like a 10th grader, I think, when they come into his life, it's very probable, in my opinion, that they weren't like, look at this cash cow that we could make some money off of, right? I think it's very possible that the Tuohys went into the situation with good intentions. There's a saying that the path to hell is paved with good intentions. There was no ethical dilemma at the beginning to contend with, right? It's a kid who's like, maybe they didn't even know he was going to be a great high school athlete, whatever. It doesn't... I'm somewhat willing to be like, at the beginning of this, I think that the Tuohys maybe had something good in mind. I think not adopting him feels like an intentional move to keep like their real children, quote unquote, real children, from having access to their wealth as adults, or at least, it doesn't mean they wouldn't share it or that he's not in their will or whatever, that Michael Oher's not in their will. But, then I think that your ethics get tested on a regular basis in your life, right? Like, you're constantly faced with new ethical challenges. And in their case, that ethical challenge was worth maybe tens of millions of dollars. But what I saw is that they had 2.5% ownership of the movie. The Tuohy family did. Michael Oher thinking he was part of that. And it was so 2.5%, and it made $300 million at the box office. So that comes out to I think $7.5 million.
It's a good chunk of money.
It's a good chunk of money, and even a wealthy family maybe didn't have $7.5 million. Like I'll acknowledge they were a wealthy family, and I think at this point it's like, this is a very classic and all too common story where a white lady becomes the focal point of a black man's story and fucks it up. And I think there's a very good chance that the Tuohys had good intentions. I don't really believe in altruism, especially not in, I think that outside of I don't even think altruism is the right term, but I do think with my kids, for example, I want what's best for them, and I'm that's a very focused, or a very significant focus of my life is what's best for them, right? It's not it's not with self-service in mind, but I wouldn't call it altruistic, because it is very much, I am biased towards my own children's safety and happiness, not the world's safety and happiness, right? And I think that it's pretty obvious that there's some part of this adoption that they viewed as something maybe socially beneficial, right? It might look good in the circles that they run in to be supporting a black child. They may feel charitable in this case. And there's also, unfortunately, there's this racial component that probably has been amplified since Michael Oher was a young man. Because I think he's a year older than me, maybe, or maybe. Let's see what Michael Oher.
Yeah, he's in his late 30s at this point. So, this story has been.
No, he's 37. He's 3 weeks older than I am, and
yeah. So this has been going on for 2 decades at this point.
Right, but I can also say the sensitivity around something like this and especially ignorance isn't an excuse, but what we were aware of, and especially what outspoken, bossy and brassy white ladies were aware of in 2003 was different than right now, or 2002 I think would have been or 1 would have been the story where the story starts. And I think to some degree, I think judging these people as basically, to me they're no shittier than the parents of a child actor, which is pretty shitty, by the way. That's I'm putting them very low on that list, on the list of parents.
I think we've done enough defending of them, because I did it too. I think we played devil's advocate as long as we could. And here's where the story, I think it's pretty damning, is, at least in the movie, I didn't read the book, but I know in the movie they at least portray that he is adopted by them.
Sure.
So they let that story, even if it was just unintentional, they clearly let it roll too far out of control and signed off on that part of the story in the public eye. So they can't really walk that back. They knew what they were doing at that point. And there is some culpability on both the movie studio and, Michael Lewis and whoever orchestrated that book deal. They clearly, the people that were benefiting from the money that came from those 2 vehicles was the family itself, and there's no mention of Michael Oher.
Well, that's at least the contention of the lawsuit, right? We don't. Right. I don't know. I think we'll find out more about that. I'm not saying he's lying. He could. No,
it's totally possible that Lewis and his book people and the studios were led to believe that Michael Oher has been adopted, and if you give this money to the Tuohy family, that is in turn going to the man who is the whole impetus for this story, right?
Sure.
So it's possible that the book people, the movie people, can be totally absolved of blame because the family led them astray. That's possible. Either way, somebody is in the wrong here, and it's certainly not Michael Oher. And it just feels really, really wrong. And man, there's just it sucks, because it's what are you even going to do at this point? The story's out there. It's 15 years old. It's frankly not even in the public eye until this all resurfaces. So at the very least, it feels like Michael Oher is going to make out financially from this. But I think just probably for him, the emotional impacts, it sucks. It's gotta suck. These people were your family, and now at the end of this, they probably won't be, or at least it'll be very scarred.
Yeah, and I guess like to me, the one thing I will say, so I'm my uncle Lanny is a black man from Spokane, Washington, who was, by the way, he was adopted. Is the way the story's been told to me my whole life by my grandparents, but I didn't see the adoption papers. He didn't take their last name or anything like that, right? He lived with them. When I was growing up, he would live with us for most summers because he was an electrician and there was more work over here. He still had like permanent residence in Spokane. I was closer with him than any other uncle I had. So for all intents and purposes, to me, he's my uncle, but he's not my biological uncle. He might not even be my uncle by adoption, to be honest with you, because I've never seen the adoption papers. But what I worry about is we're in this kind of weird stretch of America where, like, I've started to hear people say, like, cross-racial adoptions are bad. And I do think there is a very odd thing that happens, like the Angelina Jolie or Madonna, or, I mean, a lot of, I think, affluent parents who, like, almost treat children like Pokemon, like I need one from each continent. And it's like, that's pretty gross to me. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's very gross. But in these kind of organic situations, my Uncle Lanny was living in a boys' home. His parents had disowned him. My understanding is, and I could be wrong, but he was like his mom became pregnant while his dad was deployed. So like he was deployed for 12 months and in that time she got pregnant. So it was pretty obvious that it wasn't his. Yeah. And so he became, so my Uncle Lanny became like an outcast from their family. He lived in boys' homes. He was a Golden Gloves boxer because he spent his entire youth fighting. My grandpa is not a guy. There was no social media clout in 1972 or whatever. Like, or it was probably like even late 60s. Also, by the way, in Spokane in that period of time, it was not a popular decision to adopt a black kid in Spokane, Washington. You know what I mean? Like that was not a thing that people were doing in droves. There was no chicness to adopting my Uncle Lanny. And I think there's no doubt in my mind that my uncle benefited from that, but also because old people are old people and, you know, people are complex, he didn't have a perfect relationship with my grandpa the entire time they were adults. They didn't talk probably for the last 20 years that my grandpa was alive. But that's true of his biological sons too. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's like, to me, this like, because the end of this story is shitty, and there's no doubt it's shitty. The Tuohys, it sounds like, exploited Mike Glore for money in the end. And it doesn't matter with your kids. To me, it doesn't matter how much good you did when you make this kind of ethical decision. And that's why, like, we have family members who think that my daughter should be like, you should be taking her out on like auditions for fucking child act. I'm like, no. Even if this kid could make us millions of dollars, like, my child's well-being is more important. Now, the question is like, Michael, what is Mike Lore's life like if he doesn't meet the Tuohys? And it can still be, the answer can still be, it would have been worse overall without meeting them, and they still fucked him over as an adult. Those two things can be true. They could have done good for him when he was young and bad to him as an adult. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think this happens with anybody, man. I remember being at a wedding once where my buddy was getting married. His wife was adopted, and she was, I want to say she was adopted from Korea, but I'm not 100% positive. She was Asian. And her dad gave a speech, and her dad was a white man, older, and it was an awkward speech. I'm not going to lie. Like, he basically talked about going to the orphanage and then made a really big deal about how he picked her out of all those people and like really hammered that point home. And I'm sure to him it was just like a nice emotional speech. Right. But to those of us in the audience listening, we were all kind of giving ourselves sideways glances like, this is getting uncomfortable, because it definitely feels, well, I call it like self-serving altruism. You know, like, no one can deny that what you did was altruistic. What you did is a good thing, right? And like, you understand that. We all understand this is a good thing. It doesn't have to be an adoption. It can be anything. But when you start to take that good thing and really prop it up for your own benefit, that's where it stops being a good thing and starts being self-serving, you know. And that's, a lot of people do that. I mean, we talk a lot about Russell Wilson, and it often feels like he is kind of one of those people. You can't deny that a lot of the stuff he does is really, really good, but when you take those good things and you make them about you and you use them for your own personal gain or your own personal benefit, that's kind of where we start to turn that corner from, is this really a good thing or is this really more about you? I mean, everyone's been there. There's sitcoms joke about this sort of thing all the time. You know, people going to do community service, but really they're just there to like meet a woman or meet a single person.
Selfies.
Right. Or or just show off that they're there. Right. It's a running joke, because anyone who's ever done comedy knows this is something that you can just hammer on.
Yeah.
But the only reason it's a joke is because so many people do this, and even in their own minds they're thinking like, hey, I am a good person for doing this good thing. No one can deny that, but you know, we also know that you're doing this for your own benefit at times too. So, you know, when you find a truly altruistic person, man, who's not looking for the attention for what they're doing, like, cling to those people, because they can often be few and far between.
Yeah, well, and I even think like they can become non-altruistic people. I mean, you call it what'd you call it?
Self-serving altruism.
Yeah, and I would just say, like, to me, there's certainly no such thing as self-serving altruism, because that's just that's what we call not altruism.
It's an oxymoron in a way.
And I've said for a long time, like, I don't think true altruism exists, but that doesn't mean that there's not good to be done with some good intentions, right? So,
sure.
But you're always you're always being tested ethically. Your entire life, you're tested ethically. And I said this, my wife and I were talking about this earlier. So when she doesn't listen to this, if she won't know that I'm reusing the conversation, but I don't think that people who embezzle money from companies also 100% of them shoplifted as kids, right? Like, it's a different ethical dilemma. The price tag is different. The ability to get away with it is different. The penalty is different. When you're making, when you're stealing a candy bar versus potentially embezzling life-changing money, the reward is different, right? And you're constantly faced with that ethical dilemma. I used to work in a job where I would do shipping and receiving. That's like, I could have very easily screwed this company out of hundreds of thousands of dollars if I wanted to, right? But I'm an ethical person, and so I did not. But I remember, like, when people would be like, wow, really? They're letting you do both? And I'm like, yeah, it's crazy, I know. But and yeah, I think that's like, you're just constantly being tested ethically. And part of that is sometimes being ethical is doing the unexpected or unpopular thing. And, like, I think that possibly I actually didn't even factor in, we should probably move on from this topic, but I didn't factor in that Michael Lewis's company or the publishers or the movie makers could have some culpability in this, I guess, because I assume they just make a deal with whoever they make a deal with, and they paid that entity, whether that's a company or whatever.
I mean, at some point they got in a room with the Toohey family and hammered out some details, both the production company and the book company, and they had to understand what they were doing. Somebody either told a lie and said, yeah, Michael's going to make money off this.
Sure.
Or the production and publisher, they just didn't care. They didn't care who they were paying as long as they were getting the rights to this story.
Sure.
So all along the lines of this story, people were probably misbehaving.
Yeah, when it sounds like, from what I was reading, that he did sign something that basically signed the rights to that story over. He signed it, but like, he's not a savvy. Yeah, he's not a savvy person.
That's also at the heart of this whole lawsuit, is that his understanding of that document was not what it was actually intended to do. He had a completely different understanding, and he was doing that trusting the people he thought were his family members. So that's really, I mean, it's just like more than the financial implications. Just losing that faith in people you've trusted for 20 years has got to be tough, man. That's really difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's got to be emotionally damaging, and I do think, like, the Tooheys are responding by saying they're going to continue to love him. I guess it's like, I think you have to look at these things both from the perspective of, like, parents who are having a disagreement with their children, if that's how they actually view themselves, as Michael Oher's parents. And in this case, the dispute has, like, legal ramifications, and also people who might be exploiting a person for financial gain. I think both, you gotta, like, you really have to, I think, imagine their behavior here forward as both those things. And it's possible that they are still trying to salvage a relationship with a person who they view as their son. You know?
Yeah, it's complicated. People are complicated, man. We everybody in who's not in the public eye probably has gone through something like this with their own family or people that they care about. So these things are tricky. It's just usually it doesn't have this much money on the line at the end of the day.
I'm trying to pull up. So there's a couple other lawsuits. Apparently we're talking about lawsuits today. There's 3 lawsuits, and then I guess we should talk about briefly Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook both signed. Cook with the Jets for I think $8.6 million, so less than the franchise tag, on a 1-year deal, and Ezekiel Elliott with the Patriots on a deal with $3 million in guarantees, up to $6 million, I believe, with incentives. And this kind of just goes along with our conversation from a couple weeks ago where I said that it's over for running backs. Like, these are two guys.
Last Thursday, all you had to do was rail on this whole running back collusion situation, and these guys immediately got signed. Someone was listening to you.
Yeah, well, they got signed, but they got signed for less than you would expect, less than you would have expected market value to be many years ago. And, I mean, Cook still got a decent deal, but this is a guy who's been a very productive running back by statistics for a very long time and signs a deal that's less than the franchise tag. It's a 1-year deal. And it's a team that's like, for a team that doesn't really have like a long-term plan, it doesn't seem like the Jets are kind of trying to win this year, and it feels like Dalvin Cook maybe to a degree is ring chasing right now at what is probably the end of his career. I believe he's 28 years old. It's either him or Zeke is 28. Maybe they're
roughly
both.
The same age. Yeah, I think they're right around the same age. And it's kind of a market reset. You know, I don't think we have an understanding of what the market value for running backs is anymore. And both these guys, I mean, while Elliott and Cook have both been premier running backs at points in their career, the last couple of years they've both been on the decline. I mean, you can go look at their numbers and you can see, and I think any knowledgeable front office would probably look at that and say, hey, they're declining, not because of the offense around them or anything like that, but because they're just getting older, you know, and they just can't be as productive as they were when they were 21 or 22. You know, that's kind of how it goes with running backs, like we talked about last week. There's such a physical toll on those guys that when they get to this point, there's just not a lot of tread left on the tire. And as a result, I mean, I think that's why the market is probably correcting itself, even though it seems, you know, kind of unfair. And yeah, I mean, now they're basically both like we always talk about, like, bridge quarterbacks. You always hear about bridge quarterbacks, the guy who's going to hold you over for a year before you go draft the guy you really want. These guys feel like bridge running backs. I mean, they're there for a year or two, just to kind of hold things down, and then somebody else new comes in and takes their job, and then they're probably retiring at that point. Yeah, it's tough, man.
Yeah, it's over. It's over.
I do, you know, there's a guy, I'm a big fantasy football player, but one guy that kind of is an anomaly to all of this is James Conner. I don't know. Like, I think he's probably about 27 or 28 as well. Similar age as these guys. He's under contract with Arizona. Arizona sucks this year, so it's probably going to be a tough year for James. But that was a guy who was in Pittsburgh, very productive early on in his career, then experienced the decline. And if you don't know the full James Conner story, it's wild. He battled and defeated cancer, basically, and has had all sorts of, you know, adversity that most guys never face. But, you know, just focusing strictly on football, he had kind of a dip in his productivity, and then ultimately goes to Arizona and kind of bounces back really nicely with some good productive seasons the last couple years. And he seems like one of those guys that should be falling into the same camp as the rest of these guys. And maybe when his contract is up, that's exactly what will happen. He'll be at that point maybe too old. But I guess he's kind of proving that running backs, as they reach that older age, can still be productive. I feel like there's always at least one in the NFL at any given point in time. Frank Gore was that guy for forever. Marshawn was another one of those guys.
Sure.
There's always a few that'll last longer than you think, but apparently the NFL doesn't want to spend time investing in those guys anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like so much an age thing anymore, though I do remember it being attributed to age, but I think the age thing might have been a byproduct of that guy reaches his second contract and he's making whatever 10% of the salary cap or something like that, and suddenly now this team can't afford to pay offensive linemen and all of the supporting pieces for that running back that he needs to be successful, the team can't hang on to anymore. And, there's probably some examples like the Cowboys in the 90s or, the Chargers in the LaDainian Tomlinson era must have been very good at retooling their offensive line with less money on a regular basis. But, I kind of think that the age thing, though, I'm sure these guys get a little bit slower. And I think we'll start to know more about that as the next-gen stats stuff become more prevalent and we have more data to see how guys actually, what is the actual miles per hour slowdown in your 30s. We're going to know that at some point. We're going to get to see the degradation of speed and how that impacts running games and running backs, and if it impacts them, because it might not impact them as much as we think. But I do think there is a thing where when you're making two starting offensive, especially back in the early 2000s, late 90s, a running back might be making 3 times as much as the highest paid running back was making way more than the highest paid guard, like we talked about. And now I think it's probably going to shift where the highest paid guard is making more than the highest paid running back.
Yeah, I think, I guess the big shift is that running back, as we talked about the other day, is just becoming one of those expendable positions where you're just not going to sign a guy to the veteran minimum when you can draft a guy that you're going to pay much less than that on a rookie contract, right? It's the same thing. We've seen it here in Seattle with some of the special teams positions. We had a very popular punter for many years, John Ryan, and there was no reason to think his punting was declining all that much, but it just didn't make sense to sign him to a veteran contract at the cost when you could just go draft a rookie who presumably would produce about as well, maybe a little bit less, but the cost that you save can be spent to improve positions elsewhere. Same thing for we've seen it with long snappers here, we've seen it with kickers here. It's just one of those positions that unless you're one of the elite guys, top 5, top 10, teams just aren't going to resign you to that next contract because it just doesn't make a lot of financial sense when you have to go spend it on more critical areas like your line, like your quarterback, things like that.
Yeah. I think that's right, and I think that what we're seeing right now is obviously $8.6 million isn't the veterans minimum. $3 million plus $3 million in incentives is not the veterans minimum, but these are guys. The punter especially. It's also why it's infuriating that this team has had Jason Myers on big contracts, or at least on one big contract. But I thought they were going to cut him before last year, so in my mind, it's a new contract.
Yeah. Well, Myers was kind of an interesting situation, though, too. They basically let Hauschka go because he cost too much money in Seattle, and they didn't want to pay the veteran kicker, and they tried to get by on the cheap for a year, and it did not go well. So they kind of overcorrected by signing a vet for more money. I think a lot of teams kind of learned that lesson. It's 1 year it might just make sense to go with the young guy and save money there and spend it elsewhere. And the next year it might be, hey, you might have some extra money floating around, so you might as well kind of reinvest. The NFL, more than any other league, finances are they play such a big role, where in other leagues they just don't do that as much. And I think that's that can be one of the annoying things about football fans from time to time, is just hey, if you don't understand the financial implications of building an NFL team, it's going to be very tough to have the full context of being a fan, the full context that you need to be a logical fan of any of these teams. Because it is just every team is financially hamstrung. Even the best teams are financially hamstrung and just trying to piece it together and find a way to make it work year by year.
Yeah, the most annoying thing to hear in an argument is you'll be like, well, I think that's too much money to spend on that guy. And they're like, well, it's not your money. And it's no, I get that. But it is part of the cap space. And of course, the cap is
every team has a budget. Yeah, every team has a budget.
Not just a budget. They have a maximum cap. They have the most they can spend, and whatever the percentage. And of course, the cap is manipulable and all that stuff. I'm not a rube. I understand all that, but it's it's also very obvious sometimes that the Saints at the end of Drew Brees' career were going to collapse. That was obvious. That's also probably why Sean Payton left there. I want to talk about our other 2 lawsuits, but I do want to talk about your horrific bias before we get into the home run game. So
Okay.
our other two lawsuits are kind of, I think, like similar in a way because they're kind of down a civil rights or like maybe a misguided civil rights path. So Sage Steele is suing, or just finished her lawsuit, settled her lawsuit with ESPN, that I believe it stems from some comments she made on Jay Cutler's podcast that were considered controversial. She's, I think, a vaccine skeptic, for example. She made a comment
Sage Steele, the context on her is she's very, very conservative.
But is she very, very conservative, or is she just more conservative than we're willing to accept from a black woman? Because I don't find any...
Yeah, I think from everything I've read over the years, and she's a Sports Center anchor.
Give me the things that you remember, because here's the things I remember is she said that she thinks it's weird that Obama identifies as black because his mom is white. And she's in the same boat. So she's actually a rare person who I think is allowed to make that comment. If I said that, that's insane, obviously, right? But Sage Steele, a woman who is biracial, and one of those is white and one of those is black, or is mixed race, I suppose, because I think Obama is also maybe Asian and a variety of different races and ethnicities and nationalities. But
yeah, I am biracial.
Yes,
so,
please, as our biracial co-host.
Yes, I'm your field consultant on biracialness.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I claim both sides.
When it's convenient, you're Japanese.
When it's convenient for me. No, I mean, I think it's not anyone's place. I would never criticize another biracial person for claiming whatever they want to claim. I think it's different when one, if you're half white and then a half whatever type of person of color you might be, but anything that's more visible, right? Like if you're visibly Asian or visibly African American, as opposed to your white side, it always makes more sense to claim the side that's more visible. I totally understand that. And I understand why Barack Obama would say, yeah, I'm black, because that's how a lot of people will look at him. And probably a lot of what he deals with is because he is visibly a black person, right? I can't imagine, if Barack Obama walks into a bar in North Idaho he's, and people don't know he's Barack Obama. They just see his skin color. It might not go very well for him, even though he is part white or part, whatever,
sure.
Whatever else he wants to claim, right? And so I think we have a tendency, if you're biracial, to claim the side that is more visible, because that's how you're going to get treated by people. I mean, that's just the reality of the way that we do things in America. So for Sage Steele to come out and say that it's silly for him to claim being black, that's silly in and of itself, because anyone who looks at Sage Steele, if you've never seen her, she looks like an African American woman.
But isn't it the same basically to say that that she's silly for that, and she's so obviously a black woman? Isn't that the same basically as her saying that Obama should identify? I mean, as a non-biracial person.
I'm saying it's silly for her to say that, because it's not her business. It's not up to her to decide what. I understand if she wants to go around saying she's a predominantly white woman, that's absolutely her right to do that.
Sure.
And it would be foolish of her to pick on anyone else for choosing to do things the way they want as well. So
yeah, I mean, I guess
she's complicated. I'm
interested in steel manning this a little bit, because I think, to me, this doesn't seem as crazy as. So again, I think it would be crazy if I had held that opinion, and I do think there's a lot of people that hold that opinion. This Obama is actually a white guy opinion, who come at it from a bad faith place. I have no doubt about that. But I think I do think we essentialize race on so many things that, for Sage Steele, she's got a similar cultural experience. And I think there is no doubt that in some ways, like you said, Barack Obama being a black man going to Idaho would be scary. And there's definitely probably ways that it has not been beneficial. But I think there's this new thing now called political blackness. Have you heard of this? Kind because it would be like a thing where people would say Sage Steele is not politically black, but obviously black isn't a political party. Like that's the problem with it, is black people are allowed to be nuanced and not monolithical, and I think that's kind of my thing. Why I always find, and I don't know I'd be curious to see if we could actually find out if Sage Steele has actually voted for, because this thing, she's been like called very conservative because she has some like heterodox views, but a lot of times they do that to people to discredit them, when actually, like, and not that he's the god of all liberals, but like Joe Rogan has talked about how he voted for Obama, he's voted for exclusively Democrats his whole life, but he gets called a conservative. And I would almost bet Sage Steele is not so conservative. I bet along the conservative to liberal spectrum, she's probably actually left of center, but holds some conservative views, which is, by the way, most of the country. That's most of the country.
Yeah, I think now we're probably getting too far down the road of assuming what our politics are. I think in general, and this is something that we do a lot as a society now, if we see somebody who opposes our views, we label them conservative or liberal as a way of framing that they're a shitty person, right? That's what, if you're on the other side of how I believe and I want to like take a jab at you, then I try to label your political affiliation. So I guess I would say, if we don't want to put a label on her politics, it's been rumored that she's a shitty person.
But in what ways?
Let's just lay it out for what it is. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, that's what the people who have worked with, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that say she's a great person.
What are those? Because I'm actually not aware of those. I know that people were mad at her about the vaccine skepticism, which I took the vaccine, but I'm perfectly fine hearing skeptical opinions of it, and I'm not as animated by the Barack Obama thing from her specifically. Sure. If this was Michelle Tafoya, who is a conservative and has, become more outspoken in her conservative views since leaving ESPN. Also, if it was her saying that about Barack Obama, I think there's a little bit of a different charge behind that for me than if Sage Steele says it. So what are the rumors of her being a shitty person? Because I'm actually not aware of those.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember all the specifics. It's just over the years, as I've kind of read things about her, it's the undertone is that she's not the easiest person to get along with, and
sure,
that might all be conjecture. I mean, these are all things like we don't know these people, right? I did think it was interesting that she made a post online upon leaving ESPN that she is leaving to go exercise her First Amendment right. Wherever she goes next. And of course that immediately gets people speculating that she's going to Fox News or something, someplace where that maybe aligns better with her own personal views on things. But I just find it funny because there's a certain type of person that always references the First and Second Amendment.
Yeah,
and it's
some of them are comedians like me.
Wait, we all know these people. We all know everybody knows somebody that's referenced it. Nobody ever references the Third Amendment, though. Doesn't anyone want to go and quarter soldiers?
I bet I have a joke about that I have never really gotten to work, but then I used it in like a crowd work situation. I did a show this week where there was a city council candidate in the audience in Auburn, Washington.
I think I know exactly who. Based on where you're at, based on where you were, yeah.
What do you know? You do? What do you think his name is?
Oh, okay, it's a guy. Okay, never mind then. I don't know.
I wish you did know, so you could give me, because this guy was a great sport, by the way. But I ended up, the show was like going pretty rough, and so I just did a bunch of crowd work.
Sure.
And he ended up being the major subject, because I used to live in Auburn, so I know a lot about Auburn, and so I just grilled him on his campaign. And but it was fun. Like, I mean, go vote for him. His name is Clinton Taylor, by the way. He's amazing sport, city council candidate in Auburn, Washington. You have my vote if I ever live in Auburn again in my life, which for the love of God, I hope I don't. But I have a thing that so this is like, I'm now doing the bad thing of reading the headline without doing it, but I do have in an article that Sage Steele welcomed a comparison to Candace Owens. And I will say my hope is, because I find some of the things that Sage Steele says to be at least challenging in a way that I find valuable. And I don't necessarily agree with them, and I don't have to agree with them to find them valuable. But I hope that she does not become, because Candace Owens is like very obviously just a useful idiot for conservatives. Like, she's an attractive woman who is black, and you don't expect the black person to have those views because we view things as these like racial silos. But she also isn't a great she's not a great representative of even conservative beliefs, because every time she gets questioned, even the smallest amount, if she doesn't control the entire flow of conversation, she looks like an absolute moron. She's and maybe she's got legitimate conservative views, whatever. She looks stupid very often, and she's also I guess we don't want to use the C word on this podcast, but she is like an absolute piece of shit to other people. Like, the way she deals with people she disagrees with is shitty. I think similarly, like, I don't think she's as bad to other people, but I think Stacey Dash has been propped up as a person who, and it's like almost the person becomes the persona, because I don't think Stacey Dash was always such a fucking lunatic, but the more you get rewarded for this rhetoric, the more you're going to pump out that rhetoric, right? And
you
for
become
these
a caricature.
Yeah.
A caricature, really. You're no longer, the line between you being like a normal, rational human and you doing so much to like make money off this persona you've created, it gets blurred, and then it's like, is this really who you are? Or I have to imagine it's probably tough for a lot of those people to rationalize that in their mind before they make that decision, because I'm sure the money's good. They wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't some payoff at the end.
Sure.
It's interesting because I always feel like with sports media, especially, sports media is just trying to avoid at all costs, especially ESPN. I've read the ESPN book. These guys have all the fun, I think it's called, from a number of years ago.
Sure.
But ESPN, more than any other sports entity, really wants to avoid their personalities becoming bigger than the network itself, right? They don't want them to be a focal point, and they don't want them to be a distraction. And it's kind of interesting because it's only been in recent years that Sage Steele has become big enough to kind of draw that amount of attention, right? Like, and that's kind of how it goes for ESPN personalities, or especially Sports Center hosts. Like, they start off, no one really knows who they are. As the years go by, you just get more used to them being there when you turn on Sports Center, and then after a while, it seems like they are bigger than the network itself. That's always happened with Sports Center. You could think like Keith Olbermann, Dan Patrick, Kenny Mayne. There are a number of sportscasters who have been that way. Sage Steele has been with ESPN for a really long time now, so she's kind of hit that point where even if she wasn't being controversial in any way, she'd probably be costing ESPN more than they want to spend on an anchor, right?
Sure.
So in the end, this is probably mutually beneficial for them to part ways. But I always think, like, removing the race component for a second, I don't know if you remember that whole ordeal with Britt McHenry a few years ago. Remember Britt McHenry? She was like an ESPN. She was an ESPN personality, attractive, blonde-haired younger woman, and she ends up getting fired because there is a security cam video of her in a parking lot just berating a parking lot attendant. And this was like a really big news story for a while. She was just like, everything she says is captured on camera. You can see her. It's no doubt about it. This is Britt McHenry. She has to address it. But she was just being a terrible, terrible human being to somebody who really didn't deserve this amount of venom. And ultimately, it cost her job. And shortly thereafter, she latched on to I can't remember which outlet, but it was a media outlet that tends to skew conservative, and it looked like she was gonna like go full heel, right? Like, she was just gonna lean into just being this type of person, and that was gonna be her new career. And she might, for all I know, she might still be doing that, but shortly thereafter, she kind of just like dipped out of the public eye. Like,
Sure.
I don't know where she is anymore. And at the time of this controversy, she was a pretty big polarizing figure, and rather than capitalize on that in a positive way, she opted to go make the money where it was, and who knows what happened to her since. And I feel like that could happen to Sage Steele. She might, like you said, she might become the next Candace Owens. She might just become, an anchor somewhere else and like have a totally normal career arc. Or, because media tends to do this to people when they become big personalities and the money's there. They want to make you into something bigger than you might even feel comfortable with. So it really just, this is kind of getting back to the ethical discussion of earlier. What matters more to you? Does the money matter, or do your personal ethics matter? And I guess we'll find out.
So Britt McHenry worked for Fox Nation for a little bit, and now she's a local news anchor in Washington, D.C., and coincidentally born the exact same day as Michael Oher. It's weird.
So it all comes back.
It all comes full circle.
It all comes back.
So the other lawsuit we don't need to spend as much time on. It's Angel Hernandez suing Major League Baseball for racial discrimination, and it's not just because the problem again is like Angel Hernandez is really the Candace Owens of umpires asking for more equitable promotions, right? Because Angel Hernandez is widely considered to be one of the worst umpires in baseball. And because of, I think, like a relatively strong union, or the process that it takes to get rid of an umpire, or the process that the Major League Baseball, I think they are unionized. But
they're unionized.
It's tough to get rid of a guy like Angel Hernandez, and he's been bad for a very, very long time. And it's funny because it's a guy who like maybe has some good points, but he's the wrong guy to deliver this message. You know
it's like when your worst coworker goes to HR about something, and you're like, you might have a claim, have a claim, but you're really just doing this to cover your ass for all the terrible work that you do, right? Mm-hmm. We're all skeptics when it comes to the worst coworker, and that's exactly what Angel Hernandez is. He is the worst umpire. You don't even need to go far to like find evidence of this. It's all over the internet. You can go find all the videos of Angel Hernandez's terrible calls, and umpires are human. They're always going to make bad calls, but no one does it more consistently than this guy.
Yeah, and I tried to pull up his ump scorecards page because this now is measured, and there might be so much traffic to it, I couldn't get the page to pull up. But what I will tell you is it said he is in the 2nd percentile of accuracy. So
that's hard to do, man.
Yeah, that's bad.
That's really bad. Yeah, and it's funny because I do remember like back in Angel Hernandez has been around a really long time, but I can't remember if this was like maybe mid to late 90s or even into the early 2000s. But I remember like I was reading Sports Illustrated or something like that, and they did one of those like Q&A with the players where they have them rank various things or weigh in on all sorts of things. And one of the things that they had them do was rank the umpires and who they liked best and who they liked worst. And the best umpire at the time that they all liked was Angel Hernandez. And he was I'm sure he was probably better at his job back then, just because he was younger, a little bit more spry. But I think they liked him because he was like personable at the time.
Sure.
He was a guy that you could talk to. And there doesn't seem to be like any indication that he's like, there's some umpires. If you know an umpire's name, first of all, usually a bad sign.
Yes.
C.B. Buckner is another guy that's generally considered one of the worst umpires. But what makes him so terrible is on top of just being bad at his job, he's also kind of a dick. You know, he kind of takes it out on the players. And I'm sure Angel does that to some degree as a defense mechanism, but he doesn't do it as badly, it seems, as some other umps might. There's not as much ego there. Like, I think deep down, Angel knows he sucks.
Who was the guy? Is it Rick Porcello, or there was a perfect game or a no-hitter that Angel Hernandez was also, because he's like bad ball strike call guy, which is that's where umpires really make their umpire scorecards. But on a rare occasion, it was him, right? That hold on.
Are you talking about Armando Galarraga's blow?
Yes, Armando Galarraga.
I don't know. Angel Hernandez might have been involved in the game, but the guy who blew the call was Jim Joyce, who was a long time Major League ump. That's also a fascinating story. Like, if people want to, like, they've done some follow-ups on that in as the years have gone by, and man, Jim Joyce was distraught about blowing that call. I mean, he blew it pretty egregiously to blow, I think, a perfect game. Now, in today's game, it would have just been overturned on video replay, which is probably part of the reason we even have replay, because this certainly would have been overturned. But man, at the time, it was just a huge flub. But I definitely have seen since that day, seen Jim Joyce on camera crying, literally shedding tears over how he ruined this dude's perfect game. And not only did he ruin the guy's perfect game, it's not like he ruined Max Scherzer's perfect game. He ruined a nobody, Armando Galarraga, who really didn't do anything of consequence beyond that one really good day that he had that was ultimately blown by an umpire.
Yeah.
Man.
Umpires, I do think that you're right. If you know their name, they're bad. Outside of Ed Hockley. Ed Hockley is the one official that you're like, oh, he's really had to get, the biceps had to get that big. You have to get that big to be notable as an umpire or referee to without making just a horrifically bad call.
I was always a fan of Hockley early on, and then in his later years, I tend to be long-winded, so I should be able to empathize, but he would get very long-winded with his calls. As soon as that mic came on, that dude would make a 3-hour football game a 4-hour football game just with his rules explanations. Yeah.
And then he had this crazy anti-vax stance, and now we can't,
Hockley was getting pretty old. It was probably time. The best, I will say, man, I have one ref that I do like, the best ever. He's a TV analyst. He was so good they promoted him to TV analyst with Tony Romo and Jim Nantz. Gene Steratore. He was the most. I feel like he was very unassuming. He didn't want the camera on him, but he was good at his job. He didn't blow a lot of calls. And then when he wasn't an NFL ref, he was a Big Ten basketball referee. So kind of pulling double duty, which in and of itself is impressive. This man is a lifelong official. And he's actually pretty good on TV. Most of the time they pull those guys into the booth, and they kind of suck. Like, they just don't talk very well on camera. Steratore's pretty entertaining, and he has good banter back and forth with Romo and Nance. So yeah, hopefully he keeps that going for a while.
There's Pereira, Steratore, and who's the other guy?
Terry.
No,
Terry, what's his name? Terry. I know who you're talking about. There's a guy on NBC, and it's I can't remember his last name. Terry. His name is Terry.
Oh man, because there was a dude that I just saw who did. There's a YouTube thing for. I'm not. Have you ever heard of this podcast, Bussin' with the Boys?
Yeah, that's a Barstool podcast, isn't it?
It is a Barstool podcast. Yeah. And they had Bert Kreischer and Shane Gillis, along with many other people, do the Beer Olympics. And the referee they had was a guy, God damn it, what is his name? NFL, TV referee? How am I going to find this? How do we find this information? What is the guy's name? It's not Pereira. It's not Steratore. It's the younger guy.
Oh, is it Dean Blandino?
Dean Blandino, yes. So yeah. Dean Blandino does the refereeing. First off, what I love about the world today is we just have so much access to people that they've stopped being like, hey, don't be involved in that incredibly embarrassing, potentially embarrassing thing where there's a bunch of like NFL players and comedians drinking to excess. They're just like, Dean Blandino, it's the off season, so do whatever you want. But one thing about Dean Blandino that I found out that I was not aware of, did you know that guy has like a full sleeve of tattoos?
That seems to vibe with his personality.
Do you think so? I think it seems quite the opposite.
No, Dean Blandino. It's funny to me because he always gets introduced as the former head of NFL officiating, and he's been. It feels like he's been on TV for like a decade, and he's a pretty young-looking guy. So I was like, was he like a 25-year-old in charge of all these NFL officials? Because it seems like he had to be pretty young when he was the head of NFL officiating. I will give him some props, though. I mean, that dude is on a lot of Fox NFL broadcasts, but he also would do Fox's college games, too. And there would be games where I'd be watching, like, the Washington Huskies playing on Fox, Pac-12 After Dark at, like, 11:30 p.m., and they need to go to Dean Blandino for a rules interpretation. And I know that dude's got to get up early the next morning to do NFL, and he's still in studio, like, pushing midnight, offering insight. So respect to him. There's a lot of people that would say, hey man, this dude only works hard twice a week, but you're still putting in some long hours, probably not getting a lot of sleep during those weekends on the football season.
I will say this, I searched this to see if there was like pictures or whatever, and the first picture that comes up is from our friends over at Outkick. Our friends there at Outkick. Yeah. But it's literally the article is called Dean Blandino. What is it? It's Dean Blandino is all inked up, and the reason they found out is the same reason I found out, which is from this Bussin' with the Boys Beer Olympics thing. Which, by the way, feel how you want about Barstool, and hopefully one day this podcast is successful enough that you and I have a breakup over our willingness to work for Barstool. But it was very entertaining, the Bussin' with the Boys. I've never seen Bussin' with the Boys, like the podcast, the Beer Olympics was very entertaining. George Kittle is, I know I'm supposed to hate him because he plays for the Seahawks' bitter rival, but George Kittle steals it, man. He's so fucking funny. You get to see like current NFL players playing drinking games and just hammering drinks, and they're like full competitive nature and alcoholism at the same time. It's
and
they're
they're all
fun.
big dudes. Blandino seems like I don't know if he might not be very tall, but he's pretty solid. He's solidly built.
He's dwarfed by everyone else that goes. I don't know if you're allowed to say that anymore, but he is made to look small by everyone else that's there, including Gillis and Kreischer. Like they both look significantly bigger than him.
Yeah,
but
Blandino, at least on camera when he's on TV, he looks like a dude who is trying to make up for the fact that he's about 5'4" by just going to the gym and pounding out reps every single day. We all know that guy.
That's funny. Yeah, I was surprised. I thought he seemed way more boring, but the sleeve tattoos, it's also like really a testament to how we don't give a shit about tattoos anymore. This whole idea that you used to, like, you better not get any tattoos that are visible. If they know you have a tattoo, you'll never be hired. And now they're like, where are your tattoos? What life have you lived if you don't have an entire arm sleeve of tattoos?
It's true. All right. Are we ready to do this home run game?
Yeah, we'll do the home run game. You go first because I'm well behind.
I have an unprecedented opportunity for you today. It's I consider it a bit of a choose your own adventure, but
Ooh.
I was thinking when I was thinking of a person to give you today, I wanted to do somebody a little bit more recent. I feel like sometimes we dip too far back into our history, and
that's possible.
That can be tough for people. I think sometimes you might not know who everybody from the 90s is like we do. So I decided to go with the more recent guy, but then I was like, you know what? I'm going to give you an option here because there's two guys that have the exact same name spelled differently. And maybe you already know who it is, but I'm going to let you pick which one of these two guys you go after. And they're both named Chris Davis. There's Chris Davis with a C and Chris Davis with a K. And they both have played somewhat recently, but at this point, I would say the one thing it does seem is that they are both done with Major League Baseball. I know Chris Davis with a C actually retired. I don't know if Chris Davis with a K actually retired, but he hasn't played in a couple years now. He might have headed off to Japan or something to play. I don't know.
The last
or he might
I
just
saw
be done.
Chris Davis with a K, who is, I think, would otherwise he's. One of them is a white man and one is a black man.
Yes.
I saw him playing golf on YouTube somewhat recently, so I do think he's...
he's probably done then.
Yeah, he really smashes the golf ball, though.
I would imagine he does, yeah.
Also, by the way, this is a side note. Albert Pujols' son is a guy named AJ Pujols. He's in his early 20s, and he's part of this group now called Good, which is like a young guys playing golf on YouTube. But there's a video out there that I have yet to watch, but of him and Albert Pujols playing golf together. So AJ Pujols really smashes the ball. Was like a college golfer.
Yeah.
And but it's funny because Albert is like 6'3", and was like an Adonis, and his son is very thick, but looks about 5'6", and swings the fuck out of the golf club. Absolutely crushes the ball. But
yeah. I mean, people underrate, man. You don't have to be like a super big dude to just hit the golf ball a long way if you have good rotation, things like that.
God, this is a tough one, though, because I guess I almost feel like I want to guess and you just give me the closest one.
No, that is not part of the deal. You have to pick your Chris Davis first and then go with a number. So I guess
I'm going to go with the white Chris Davis. Okay. Or the former...
Vanilla Chris.
The only reason I'm hesitant is because I know we had a couple years that were just absolutely monstrous, but then he had he's a guy who was like one of the early 3 true outcomes guys, just maybe even for much of his career like a 2.5 true outcomes guys, because I think there were points where he didn't walk a ton and just absolutely smashed the ball, but played in Texas and Baltimore, 2 very hitter friendly places, maybe some other destinations that were hitter friendly. And I believe there was a year where he pumped 56 home runs, and then a lot of years, but I think he put up decent numbers. And I want to say probably a 12-year career, but it also feels like there's no way he's that old, but I'm also getting old. We had a lot of existential dread happening in front of you right now. But so I'm going to go an average of... And then there's like, I think, partial seasons in there. It's a very good. This is a very good home run game person, and one where you really, I think it's a struggle if you don't know. Because I'm going to say he probably averages like 25 home runs, but that's with multiple like 40 plus. So I'm going to say 265 home runs.
Okay. I'm going to give you details about both guys first, and then I'll give you the number. So 260. I'm just going to write it down so I don't forget. 265.
Oh no, this doesn't feel good.
The
suspense is brutal.
I always I found both of these guys fascinating because each of them were prolific home run hitters for very short periods of time. So
Yeah.
Chris Davis in 2013 and 2015 leads the league in home runs. In 2013, he has 53 home runs. In 2015, I don't know if I just said 2013, but 2013 he has 53. 2015 he has 47. He leads the league both those years. The other Chris Davis with a K, in 2018 leads the league with 48 home runs. So, they were both fascinating in that they were these prolific home run hitters that they never really hit for a high average at a time when that was still being penalized. Chris Davis with a C especially that dude really struggled with his batting average in certain seasons. Frequent seasons where he's hitting in the 100s, doesn't even crack the Mendoza line. Early in his career, he is splitting time a lot. I mean, there's a lot of seasons early on that Chris Davis with a C is not playing a full year. And only when he gets to Baltimore and really does he really find himself and really kind of hit all those home runs that kind of add up. Chris Davis with a K, the most fascinating thing about him, well, there's two. I don't know if you remember this, but he had to become a full-time DH about midway through his career because he got the yips. He couldn't throw. He started out as an outfielder, and there were all sorts of articles and stories written about his mental battle just being able to throw the ball. He just flat out could not throw the ball anymore. Not like he was inaccurate, but his body just could not capture the muscle memory of throwing.
Wow.
But because his bat was so good, they make him a full-time DH. He has those seasons where he does lead the league in home runs and puts up some good numbers. But the other kind of really interesting thing about Chris Davis with a K is that for 4 straight years, he finishes with the exact same batting average at the end of the season. A batting average of 247 every single year from 2015 through 2018. Just wild that he landed on that same number each time. Yeah. So I will say that you split the difference between the two with your guess. First, I'll give you Chris Davis with a K, who you were not going for. He ends up having 221 home runs over the course of 9 seasons, and it's potential for more, I guess, if he makes a comeback, but it seems like his days might be done. Chris Davis with a C is a little bit more prolific. He has a 13-year career, so he plays a few more years. Like you said, he plays in 2 very hitter-friendly ballparks where Chris Davis with a K did not really have that luxury so much. But Chris Davis with a C, he finishes his career with 295 home runs. So you were pretty close. Only
Not too
30
bad.
away. 30 away, yeah.
It was really the debate of is he more or less than 300 because how many years did he end up playing?
He ended up playing 13 years, but like I said, early on, the first, he spends basically 2008 through 2011, at least half of 2011 with Texas. Mm-hmm. And he's never really playing what anyone would consider close to a full season those first few years. But he did come up when he was 22. So he ends up having, right now he's only 36, 37 years old. So he did call it quits, though. But his last season is 2020 when he's 34 years old, and that's only a partial season. Sure. But all those years prior to that in Baltimore, he's playing pretty healthy amount of games. And that's where he's having his really good seasons where he is just launching the ball. He's a big dude. He was a really big dude. Left-handed hitter. Took advantage of some of those short porches in the AL East where he could kind of crank balls out, I'm sure. And 295 home runs in his career, just under that all-important 300 mark, but pretty good guess on your part.
Yeah, I feel good about that. He also feels like a guy who had to have at some point come to Seattle and failed and then moved on, like a Mark Trumbo type where Mark Trumbo came here and was like, he's not that good. And then he just goes and mashes somewhere else. Or Vladimir Ballantyne's another one that just was, great elsewhere.
Yeah,
largely.
Chris Davis was a little bit ahead of his time. I mean, the second half of his career, people were willing to overlook the average, for the power. But the first half of his career, it was still, in Texas. Texas wasn't willing to give him as much of a leash because it was still an issue. Striking out a lot. And those average issues were not going to play a full season. And then Baltimore was like, we just don't even care about that. Just hit the home runs, man.
Well, and I remember, and this is my memory was that he came up with, he was playing some other positions, and it looks like at different points in his career, he's played both corner outfield spots and third base with some frequency, but ended up being relegated to first base and pitched a couple times. My memory is actually like surprising velocity for a pitcher.
I don't remember him pitching, but
player pitching.
He is he's 6'4", 255 pounds. So
Yeah,
I would
that's
hope
what's on
at least
the-
that's his listed weight. So I would hope he has some good velocity.
Let's see, Chris Davis. Can we get a pitching velocity quickly? I don't think we can. I know there's a wait. Hold on. This might be possible.
By contrast, other Chris Davis with a K would have been a real adventure to watch on the mound since he could not throw.
Yeah,
I feel a little bad. I feel a little bad picking on that because there's been a lot written about this is like totally a mental struggle with the yips that he never ever really got over. But also, I mean, that is part of the game. So
Yeah, so Chris Davis with a C as a pitcher in 2012 pitches 2 innings, touches. It looks like he maybe averaged 88 on the fastball, which is I think better than you'd expect, especially from a first baseman. So. I do miss, there's 2 things that I miss in today's game, which is seeing pitchers hit regularly and seeing position players pitch somewhat often. I miss both those things. It's seeing it's like seeing Steph Curry golf or whatever. Like it's amazing when you see people who are bad at it, when you see Charles Barkley, and when you see Steph Curry, who's like, well, what is this guy not great at? Like, he's got to be just amazing at everything, I guess.
Yeah, it is unfortunate because it does feel like major league teams are more willing than ever to just throw a position player out on the mound to cover some innings in the middle of a blowout, right?
Yeah.
But none of those guys put forth any effort anymore. It's like they give a Pro Bowl level effort when they get onto the mound. It's like, I know you can throw better than an eephus, so at least try a little bit, but they just want to throw their little eephus up there, mix in the occasional breaking ball, and that's it. It's very disappointing.
All right, so my home run game guy for you, which I guess, by the way, we should start doing like plugs. You don't have anything to plug, Alex. You got to start doing some live comedy or something.
I don't want to do anything that requires a plug. I'm at the point where I just want to be left alone. I have nothing to plug. Don't let me plug anything. Leave me alone.
I have shows. Hold on, I'm going to pull this up so that we, the few people that make it all the way through the home run game, you have to sit through another couple minutes of dog shit before we.
If you had caught me 10 years ago doing this podcast, I would have a lot to plug, and I would have been like very eager to do it. Yeah. And now, no, man,
nothing.
August
25th is our next Bickerson's Brewhouse show. I'm not going to be there, but a great lineup: Narin Van, Adam Tiller, and Mike Hansen. Great comics. It'll be a fun show. I'm opening for Pauly Shore that whole weekend. Comedy Club in one
Paul
show.
Shore, as in the former Pauly Shore.
What did I say? I said Pauly, or did I?
Oh, I only heard Paul, but it might have been
an internet problem.
I was like, it sounds like he's really cleaned himself up.
Damn
and
it. I gotta fix
matured.
this shit. But
Pauly Shore, that's a good one, man.
Yeah, that'll be somewhat lucrative. Interestingly, 20 minutes per show. I have to be clean, which I don't normally like to do, but it'll be a good opportunity to get one good set clean so I can use it as a tape.
Is Pauly Shore a clean comedian? Does he not?
He's not, and I've worked with him in the past. A lot of times what happens is what these guys require from openers is a response to some horrible event that happened earlier in their career.
Yeah,
and so
they had like a Bob Saget get up there and just unload on the crowd. Yeah.
The last time I worked with Pauly Shore, there was no requirements for cleanliness, but he that's what he requires now. And I finally, back then I could not have done 20 minutes clean. Now I should be fine. Yeah. I'm also having to buy like specific merch that it relates to a joke I can do clean, because my other merch. The merch I've been selling is a joke about penises. I don't know how to make it clean enough to sell. So, anyways, that I'll be there, Enumclaw, and then if we have any listeners in Medford, Oregon, and the surrounding area, with Black Market Entertainment down there, I'll be there the 7th through 9th with my buddy Jess Everett, and then Bickerson's Brewhouse, by the way, future shows September 23rd and October 27th. Those are the ones we have scheduled right now. So please come out to those because we want to keep doing them. We want to make it worth the brewery's while to have us come out. They do a great job of promoting it. I think it's been sold out at least 2 of the 3 shows we've done so far, but keep doing that. Keep making that happen. All right. And shout out to Frank and Sean, I believe is his wife.
Yep.
Frank and Sean. The folks out there, I can't remember what the other bartender's name is, but she's also great. And great beer. They have a beer called it's called like the Funky Feral Feline or something like that. It's like one of the best Pilsners I've ever had in my life. And I brought it home to my wife, and I was going to judge my wife if she didn't like it, and she also was like, "This is fucking great." And so I was pretty in that exact voice.
Even as a person that doesn't drink a ton of beer, I had 3 or 4 the night I came out to the show that you did there. And they're my friends. They're really nice people, but I actually like drinking their beer too.
I would just not comment on their beer if I didn't actually like their beer. I would never say it was bad, but I would not comment on. And by the way, that beer is so good that I do a rare thing when I go there, which is I just order that. I've had one other beer from them, and then other than that, it's just that beer over and over again because I don't want to risk not having a beer that's so great as the Funky Fruit. I'm trying to get him to make it a flagship year-round beer. So Frank, I know you're listening. You're one of the few and the proud and the brave that listen this far into the podcast. It's an incredible beer. Very good brewery. 2 locations, Ballard and Renton. So go drink there and then come see the comedy show at the Renton location. Now that all out of the way, I have a guy who is also more contemporary than we've been going. I feel like that might be a complaint from your wife. Every time you have a home run game,
complaints. No,
every time there's a home run game comment, I assume it comes at least indirectly from your wife.
One thing
I
thought about doing before you give me your guy, I thought about giving you an NL pitcher, but I was like, the variance on a miss would be so like it'd almost be more like, can you nail it on the nuts?
Yeah, that's why I thought about that a long time ago, and that's why I always thought percentage would have been interesting to do.
Right.
But I think that like it's tough because I could be if I guess 7 and it's 1, that's a 700% miss.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm excited to hear this guy.
All right, your guy is. Let me see if I feel like this can't be his actual first name, but it is. It is one Buster Posey. Full name Gerald Dempsey Posey, not Buster.
Gerald Dempsey. Okay, yeah, Buster Posey. Man, he retired earlier than I thought he would. Mm-hmm. I still remember when he came up, which was probably around 2010-ish, I would say. So he didn't have a very long career. I do remember he was like a shortstop or a second baseman in college, and he was one of those first guys that the Giants just looked at him and were like, this guy's got a hell of a bat, but he's not going to be a shortstop for us, so we're going to make him a catcher. There was that whole era, and I think he was like the first guy that kind of kickstarted this era of teams being like, you know what, we can just go draft any middle infielder from the college ranks and try to turn him into a catcher. And it pretty much failed spectacularly with all of them except Buster Posey. But teams really it was like one of those things like when the NFL gets like on one certain type of play and like every team just copycats it. Buster Posey kind of kickstarted this copycat league of drafting athletes to be catchers. So he only plays like maybe, I don't know, a dozen years, if that. And he's a catcher, so he's not a huge home run guy, but if I remember correctly, he had some pretty big years in there where he probably got up around 30, but I don't think he averaged anywhere near that. I would say he probably averaged. His later years were rough. The last few years of his career, he wasn't playing a lot. He was injured. I can't imagine his power numbers were great because of that. I said he probably played about a dozen years, and he probably averaged around, 15 to 20 a year maybe. So if we were estimating 20 over the course of, say, 10 years, then he'd be right around 200. I'm going to say 190.
So against all odds, I think I've barely beaten you this week.
So I'm close. That's good. That's good.
It was
That's all I
he
care
has.
about.
So yeah, we'll go through the the whole histrionics, and then so he does play exactly 12 seasons, but your instincts were pretty much right. He comes up briefly in 2009, wins Rookie of the Year in 2010, and then he actually never hit 30 home runs in a year, which is a little bit surprising to me. I would have assumed he would have hit at least the highest home run total he ever had was 2012. He hits 24 home runs, 39 doubles, plays 148 games, and leads the National League in batting average at 336. Which is,
he was always a really good average hitter. I remember that.
Yeah, very good contact. Never struck out 100 times in a season in his career, which is in today's game almost unheard of. But was never. I think one of his problems as a player, and what kind of I think will tarnish his legacy a little bit. I imagine he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, but I could be wrong. Is towards the end of his career, he becomes a guy that's going to spend some time at first base, and he's not actually a very good first baseman offensively. He's a very good catcher. First base, to be a good offensive first baseman, you got to be one of the better hitters in all of baseball, and he just wasn't that. He was not a great power hitter.
Yeah.
He ends his career
Similar to Joe Mauer, I would say. Even though Joe Mauer was a traditional catcher,
yes,
he was another guy that his body just started to break down, and they tried to salvage his bat by moving him to first, but they kind of tried to salvage it too late. It's almost like when you look at a guy like Posey or Mauer, it's like, why? Bryce Harper's a good example of this. He was a catcher in college, and teams saw how good that bat was, and they were like, we're not even going to let you catch. We're just going to train you how to play the outfield, and now he's starting to learn first base because they want that bat. And it's like, that was maybe the lesson that they kind of learned from that Mauer Posey era. It's like, if they've got that good of a bat, go find yourself a catcher who doesn't really hit much but plays good defense and just stick that bat somewhere in the lineup.
Yeah, so around the time, 2007, well, let's see, he starts playing first base a decent amount, pretty early, actually. I take it back a little bit. 2010, he plays 76 games at catcher and 30 games at first base, and then he's kind of a similar kind of split, about 20% of his games are at 20 to 25% are at first base. And yeah, it probably hurts his legacy a little bit. He won Rookie of the Year in 2010 and MVP in 2012. I'd be curious to see how modern analytics views that. But he ends his career 12 years, also sat out the 2020 season because of COVID, ends his career with 158 home runs. So I think I was 30 off and you were 32 off. So I'm slowly chipping away at the hundrds of home
Two
run
home runs at a
deficit.
time, yeah. That was a pretty good week for both of us, though. We were right there. I overshot it a little bit with Posey. And that's the thing about catchers, man. Even the best catchers are never usually home run hitters.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, and the first base thing is interesting because I think that that was some thought of what they could do with Robinson Cano, for example. Did Cano ever end up making that move? Did he ever play a lot at first base?
The last couple of years of Cano, he was such a good defensive second baseman. I can't imagine he played a ton of first base, and he really wasn't even playing a whole lot those last few years.
Yeah, he played. You're right. He played in Seattle. He played 14 games there in 2018 and then 2009. And those are the 14. He plays 14 games there, starts 10, and those are the only games he ever plays in his career there. So I did remember that kind of being a. But again, he's a guy who, when you take him away from a premium defensive position, he goes from being a very good hitter to a below average first baseman offensively.
Yeah. I get why teams are hesitant to move guys to an easier position to preserve their bat. I get why you would be hesitant to do that. It seems like most teams, when they make those moves, it's too late. It's usually too late for those guys. They should have if they had made them 5 to 10 years earlier, then they save those guys their knees or whatever they're trying to do to kind of preserve their ability to keep hitting. They always seem to do it too late, or maybe it's just a lost cause at that point.
Yep. All right, well, Casey McLean comedy everywhere. I realized I just looked at the time and I got to go pick up my daughter, but
Alex SSN everywhere, yes.
Yeah, and we're gonna do 17 episodes this week unless Alex objects. If he objects, then you have him to blame. We didn't even talk about we had a troll who can fuck off. That's what I'll say. We had a troll.
You know what? I appreciate that he was somebody who decided to listen to what we had to say, but he also wanted to be very confrontational about what he'd heard. So.
Well, he also wanted to be very confrontational about something we did 3 weeks ago, but then expected us to have perfect recall of every bad thing Russell Wilson has ever done. He's like, oh, yeah, I didn't even notice the thing. Where I was like, fuck you, man.
I'm not entirely unsure that wasn't Russell Wilson that we were talking to.
He did the cowardly thing, too, where it got to a point where I think, like, pretty obviously I made the point that I was making. Like, it was undeniable anymore. And he just, like, stopped responding and moved on to other stuff.
You guys, I mean, you went for like
I'm unemployed,
2 hours.
man. I got a fucking lot of time. I'm unemployed.
This guy, I mean, you were doing everything. You were
responsibility.
doing everything you could to get this guy to stop talking, and he just wouldn't shut up. So, I mean, he was doing more of the legwork of keeping it going. I was
defending you even, which I fucking hate doing.
I appreciate. I appreciate you. At the same time, I was doing a workout class.
Alex was doing fucking Zumba, and
I work out with a bunch of olds at the YMCA. Just a lot of like, calisthenic type things, and I love it. It's great. That's where I'm at in life.
All right. Alex SSN, Casey McLean Comedy. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening.